seem to be interested in things that are universal, that seem to apply to pretty much everybody. Um, and when it comes to happiness, I think you could say that most everybody would like to have that. Um, and by that, I definitely don't mean that feeling you get in response to something, because yes, that is happiness, but it's also not the happiness, you know. The happiness, like that feeling day in and day out, the underlying feeling, the thing that is part of everything you do, it is the thing. And have you ever met a happy person? Not an outgoing person or a bubbly person or a person who is necessarily just honest and good, but happy. And if you have, what do they feel like? So far in my experience, it seems like the happy people that I've met, of course, have those times where it's like you're not happy, you're less than happy, maybe even depressed. But it seems like a happy person, or a person who, all in all, has gotten a real sense of satisfaction from life so far. Because literally, I mean, every single person is gonna have some shit that happens, and they're gonna do some really bad stuff. Not evil, but bad. Do stuff that is gonna be forever etched in your memory as a clear mistake. But happiness is the overall container, the overall scheme, I guess you could say. Happiness is something that ends up being something that, if you are that, if you actually are happy, then people just like being around you. A happy person does something that I've said a lot. They always go back to middle. They don't stay ecstatic, and they don't stay sad. I'm aware that there are people who have like things with them biologically to where they're chemically further on the negative side, you could say. But there are also people who are, I guess you could say, annoyingly optimistic, but I'm not trying to judge, but there's that range of people who are, you know, there's people who can always um, give you a negative interpretation of just about everything that comes, and there's always somebody who can give you a positive twist on everything that comes, because there's always that. There's always those two things in each and every event. There's always a positive interpretation or a negative one. And we're effectively casting illusions out here in life. We are looking at things as they happen and saying, well, hopefully this, or maybe it means that. When something just god awful happens, we say, well, maybe it's a blessing in disguise. And we can't really help that because we want to cast that. Somehow saying it, just putting it out there, makes it slightly more possible that could be the case, that could be the truth. Just by saying it, it increases the chances that could happen just by those words being uttered. Because it's certainly more than those words having not been said at all. But from what I've seen, there's a couple of key ingredients if we want to get cliche. And let's just start from the beginning, man. I mean, you're born. You enter the world, and you're just a little baby. and you're around these people, your parents, and you are just completely dependent on those people. And a lot of what goes on at that period, like, obviously, you have no real impact on. As a little baby, you're making everybody around you happy. Everybody's so happy to see a baby. Let's say in the ideal setting where, you chose to have a baby, or you want to have a baby, and everybody welcomes it, and it's a good thing. And I think that, more than I can probably say, has an impact on what comes later. Because say it's the opposite. Say, as a baby, you're in an environment where the general undertone is that of, didn't really want this, but I'm kind of stuck with it. That sort of vibe. I have to think that plays a role in what comes later. Many times people have kids, obviously, on accident, and they end up falling in love, and just do a complete 180. And a lot of times people have kids on purpose and end up finding out that it's different than what they thought. But then it goes on. You get a little older now. And when you start to get around other kids, that's when the game really begins. That's when you start socializing. That's when you start discovering what sort of little person you are. And happiness really isn't too much of an issue when you're a kid, because you haven't yet honed down, sharpened, and confined reality to language. And you have more of an oceanic experience. You have more of a raw, complete, and just uninterpreted world. And you cry when you're a baby, when you want food, when you're maybe uncomfortable. And it's just so simple. And we grow right out of that. I mean, we obviously don't just burst into tears when we get hungry when we're a little older. So time goes. And you get a little older and you hit your teenage years. And this is where shit has already started to lay its foundation. At this point, you're already starting to feel and get a good sense of what's going on. And a lot of things are still surprises to you. And you still don't have maximum agency. And the strangest years for a person are probably ages 12 to 18, 12 to 20, somewhere in there. That's when you're susceptible to believing things wholeheartedly that are just absolutely not the case. And it's an important time to have at least one person. All you need is one person around who is sensible. You just need one. And you go through that time, and you hone it, and it gets sharper and sharper and sharper. The world is becoming more and more worded and imaged and screened. And by this point, you have some notches in your belt, so to speak. You've done some things. Maybe you played a sport, you played an instrument. And by this point, you've sort of discovered a couple of things that you like doing. And you've either been good at it or you haven't. And that there is pretty important. That thing that you found when you were younger, that thing that just maybe you obsessed over and really got into. Did you get good at that? Because that's going to play a role later. Were you in a situation where you were with your peers doing this thing, say it's a sport or, anything? Did you excel? Did you stand out? Or did you not? And then you take it over to the social arena. Were you well liked? Or were you not? And just be honest, this isn't like a judgment thing. This is just an honest look, an honest assessment. Did you do really, really well at the things that you liked and the things that you really, really wanted to do? And when it came to people, did it seem like people liked being around you? Then you go on. You get older and older, and maybe you haven't planned for the rest of your life yet. Maybe you don't even look that far in the future. But time is going and time is going. And you're starting to become an adult now. You're starting to get this real sense of agency. You're starting to get some sense of authority over yourself. And by the time you hit 20, you can sort of start to give a little paragraph, a description of who and what you are. And you have little signs of the effectiveness of your mind, your intelligence, your neurology, your psychology. And this is an important point right here. It's a little different for men and women. There's a slight delay for men, it seems, because I didn't start getting my shit together till I was like 26. But when I was that age, nothing existed beyond my immediate proximity. I didn't really think about anything that was out of my visual range. For me, that period of time was a bit of a blur because it was so present. It wasn't intentionally present like some spiritual shit. It was just like completely concerned with the moment, and that's it. So time goes and goes. You wake up in the morning. What do you feel? You go to bed at night. What do you feel? You've experienced love, maybe. Maybe you haven't. You've had a job, maybe. Maybe you haven't. And as things are happening to you, you start to make conclusions about people, yourself, and the world. And I think it's too soon. Let's say, if you're under 30, I think it's too soon to really say whether or not you're satisfied with life. At least for me, and for those I knew, because everybody was still sort of an incomplete project at that time. And things were just so unsettled, and it seemed like there weren't clear directions you could go in. And are you the sort of person when something happens, do you take that event and use it to define the world? Like, when somebody does something bad to you, does that make you define just a little more that humans are bad? Or if you fail, do you take that and define yourself just a little bit more that you're a failure? And if you succeed, do you also do that? You say, well, I'm a success. It seems like when bad things happen, people are more likely to use that event as a defining event. And once you get into that sort of game, once you get into that sort of situation where you're using events to broadly categorize that thing by that event, you'll keep doing it. You'll keep doing it. If you do it once, you'll do it twice. And these things will stand out to you because it's almost like it has a momentum. So it sort of snowballs. And when something good happens, you don't really tend to think to yourself, this is a defining thing. It feels more like a fluke or some product of hard work that's so unique and distinct that it's not something that could be defining, you know. But it seems like bad things are just totally different. that they're so easily able to be classified as the truth. But even with the up and the down, a person should not use those things to absolutely and finally conclude this is the nature of this or that, and instead just return to middle. You have to. Because if you can do that, then those events will pass through you. They won't stick. And you'll have different things that you use to define what this or that is, including people, including yourself. And that's the main thing about happiness. It's almost like a frequency or a wavelength or a way of being or a state. It includes everything, and it includes nothing at the same time, which sounds paradoxical and impossible, but it's true. What I mean by it including nothing is that you have to be able to look at yourself, events, and things that happen on a very, very, very long timeline. If you can view yourself on a potentially infinite timeline, then it changes the way things happen. But not just on an infinite timeline, also within your short little timeline here on Earth. Also within, like, specificity. It's weird. There's things that I've done in the past that are not good, you know. I've been in fights, especially when I was younger. I partied a lot, and I would go out and, you know, if somebody said something wrong, I was just quick to fight. And when I look back at that, I understand why. I have answers. I have reasons that aren't excuses. They're just the best and most likely interpretation. And the thing is, when it comes to life, you need to have an explanation for things. For the things that have happened to you, for the things people have done to you, what the world has done to you, and what you've done to the world, you need to have answers for those things. You can't just let them go unanswered. Otherwise, they could potentially be classified as anything. And they'll exist as a disorganized kind of feeling. And that's important. Like, it really is. If somebody did something to you, you need to have an answer for that. Why do you think it happened? Truly. If your father was terrible and it seemed like he didn't love you, you need to have an answer for why that is. A truthful one. You need to see his character as an individual separate from you. You need to get rid of the, father-child relationship and look at that person as an individual and look at all of his other relationships too. Relationship with your mother, with his friends, what his work life has been like, his success in life in general, whether or not he has been a good person, whether or not he has excelled at anything, whether or not he has honor, nobility, if he's truthful. Because it's much easier to come up with a proper answer and conclude that whole situation if you know these things. Because nobody knows more than you that relationship. And that's just one thing. If you totally sucked at basketball, or if you totally sucked at, playing the saxophone, you need to know why. You need to have an answer for that. Otherwise, you might just say, 20 years from now, I'm no good at anything. I couldn't even learn to play the saxophone. Or, I'll never be in a good relationship. My own father didn't love me. Which is a totally not a good explanation for that. That's just sort of a statement that's been rendered and applied to that relationship in a very simple, undetailed way that paints the relationship a certain way. And it will be a sort of hook into the future for future relationships. So, in order to be happy, you have to have an explanation for why things happen the way they did. And you'll know which things need explanations. Because the things that need an explanation will call to you. They'll almost demand your attention. They will they will appear in your mind from time to time, and they will have with them a heavy feeling. They will have with them this feeling of calling. And this stuff, like, it needs to be addressed. If you have a memory that's older than a year that still pulls out of you a strong emotional reaction, then it's effectively siphoning out off your energy now, and it's locking it in that place in time in the past. And it needs an explanation. And you don't necessarily need the other person or anything like that. And it's not like an investigation where you need to find out why. You just need to understand the situation fully. Because the feeling of walking around day to day as a happy person, such a person has full command, or at least almost full command, of their life force. The feeling of frustration, dissatisfaction, of maybe anger and disappointment comes with not having enough energy to deal with things. That's where it comes from. You don't have the energy, you don't have the words, you don't have the understanding, you don't have the bandwidth. You just don't have it. You don't have the force to adequately understand things. And I remember what that was like when I was younger, maybe in my lower 20s. Everything was confusing. I didn't know why this or that would be happening. And when things did happen, I would recall to something in the past and tether those things together as if they're related. I couldn't see what was happening in a way that's brand new, like in real time. And I don't know if this is something that just comes with maturity or what, or if it's something that comes with sort of being interested in just sort of being a scholar in general, like a freelance scholar. Like, that is something I would also just highly, highly recommend. But not everybody's interested in learning. Not everybody's interested in history and all this stuff, but it does help. It does change the way you see the world. Knowing about it, knowing about history, knowing about people, all these people who have existed, who have said all these great things and done all these things. So, like, it helps to know that stuff. And it does fill you out geographically. You need to be in a position where you trust this universe, you trust reality, and you like it. You like the scheme, you like the state of affairs. And you fully understand that there's good and bad people, but you still like it. And I understand that not everybody is, let's just say, lucky. Like, there's a couple of things that help. First of all, it's helpful to be physically strong. It's helpful to be able to move through this world to where you physically feel light and objects around you aren't heavy. It helps to navigate the world in a way that doesn't make you tired. It helps to have a strong command of your native and core language. It helps to be able to describe things that are going on, describes things that are going on inside of you, and to be able to describe other people accurately, and dare I say, artfully, beautifully. Is it possible to still see the beauty in people? Not in a romantic way, but just the beauty. Can you still see the beauty in this universe around you? Because, as with all things, it comes as beautiful and ugly as well. There are both in equal measure. And I understand there are people who are born in just horribly, horribly disadvantaged situations. I'm not quite sure of the word to use, but born in a situation to where they really feel like that they wish they were born to somebody else. And honestly, just saying that, it's just like a tragic thing to say, and I, thinking about that, it just, I feel for that situation. I do sometimes wonder what it would have been like to be born as somebody else. A little shorter, maybe, a little less handsome, a little less charming, a little less intelligent, a little less understanding. I'm not trying to brag, but I really have wondered that, and what I would be like, and what I would do to navigate this world if I didn't have the things that I have, being who I am. You could also say, yes, it's easy for this person to be happy. It's easy for that person to be happy. But there's always this situation where people seem to have the trappings of happiness, and you dig a little deeper and they're just horribly unhappy, like wealthy people, extremely good-looking people, just not happy, missing something. And you can feel it, man. It's like love. It's one of those universals. It's like way deep down inside, truly, everybody wants to love and be loved, yes. But everybody also wants to be happy. And sometimes those two things do go together. There's been a period of time now where people have been saying something. It's been kind of common for maybe the last 15 years, where people basically say that they don't care about what other people think. But that's just not true. Yeah, there's always at least one person who what they think matters. Maybe 99.9% of the population, you don't care about what they think because they don't know you, of course. But the people in your life, the people who you meet, who get to know you, who you care about, you care what they think. And if you don't, you need to ask why. Why do you not care what your fellow man thinks of you, what your fellow human being thinks of you? And I think that's more of a reactionary statement to something that's happened, or a series of things that's happened. Because to not care is to take those negative interpretations and say, well, they don't matter. I think if a person receives a certain amount of negativity, they'll say, well, I don't care what people think. Because it's less common to hear somebody who gets a lot of praise, a lot of positive feedback to say that they don't care. They're more likely to say, I value your opinion. But you have to ask why. I'm I'm very certain about this. For even those things that I just said, you must have an explanation. You must have an explanation for why you don't care about what people think about you. Why is that the case? And in your position as a person who doesn't care what other people think, are you happy? The things that pass by, that come and go, will bring you up and bring you down, obviously, but there's an undercurrent there. There's an underlying thing that persists no matter what. You could be put in any situation. Let's say a happy person can be put in just about any situation and be happy still. They can be alone, they can be single, they can be married, they can be at work, they can be driving, they can be standing in line, they could be doing their taxes, they could be at a baseball game, they could be anywhere. And they don't seem to be too affected by what's going on around them. They have this undercurrent that seems to persist. And that's what I mean. That's the thing. And it's that person who, honestly, you can kind of trust, because that's a constant, reliable, true feeling coming out of that person. And some people, truthfully, are, for a great part of the day, on the brink of tears. Why? I am one person, and I only meet so many people. But the people I do meet, if I come across something like that, and somebody's that unhappy, I am genuinely, I can't help it. I need to change that, I can't let that go, And it doesn't take a lot of digging. Normally, when a person starts to tell you why they're unhappy, they list events. And after they list those events, they tell you a judgment about that whole thing, so to speak. Maybe they'll tell you about their last couple of relationships and say something about, that's sort of a final statement about dating in general. They'll say, me and so-and-so just broke up. I'm never going to meet anybody. Or, I'm not lovable. Or, I wasn't meant to be loved. And that's what I mean. Before taking that step of wrapping a area of life in a final conclusion, because you'll sell yourself on it. You will persuade yourself that that is the case, and it's totally justified in doing so. But you must resist that. And for each individual relationship, come up with an explanation, a real explanation, an honest explanation, and then digest it and let it pass through you. And that will change the way you meet the next person. You will not bring those past relationships. You will have those past relationships and all of their events and the wisdom therein. You will have the things that you should have learned from those relationships with you. But you will not carry into that relationship the morass, the huge negative ball of energy into it, dooming it from the start. And that's the key, really. It's not passivity, but it operates like passivity. Like somebody throws a brick at you and it just passes right through you. It's as if you had that choice to either get hit by the brick or just let it pass through you. And we kind of do, in a way, on this one, when it comes to our psychological state. You need to find a way to be able to interpret each thing that's happened, each major thing that you can pick, and talk about as something that has taken away from your perceived sense of well-being, and come up with a very, very good explanation for why that happened. And for some things, the explanation is out of your hands. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But you need to come up with the explanation that allows you to have the words to organize it and let it pass. Because these things will build and build and build. And it feels like you're up in your eyeballs with this thing that you can't get rid of. And it's not even that you feel unhappy, it's that you feel almost tormented or in a state of, let's call it permanent conflict, or as if there is this interpretation that's following you that you can't get away from. There are many, many things that either have been explained to you by somebody else that are wrong, that are incongruent with the actual truth, or you haven't gone through it yet and come up with the words, the explanation. And this is important, the words. It doesn't sound like anything, it doesn't sound like much, but it's so important to have the words. Because until then, these things exist as a sort of ephemeral, disorganized cloud that can move into this and into that inside of you and affect this and affect that. It needs to be worded and organized so you know where to put it. Otherwise, it's everywhere. And if you can do that, you will feel happy. Because these things are a part of you, they go with you for the rest of your life, but they're not there in the same way. You can live and be in each passing second as a fresh second, as a true current of time that's brand new, where it's not stained with the cloud of these things that have happened so far. And with that sort of thing in the background, it's impossible to judge people or render an objective judgment on new people. It can't be done. That cloud will affect everything that comes along, no matter what. And that cloud is calling for you and waiting to be tamed and waiting to be worded and organized and put where it needs to be put. And it's more simple than it sounds, but in its simplicity, it's immensely powerful. I can't tell you how powerful this is. It's actually like one of those things that's so clear and obvious, it's easy to just not even, maybe even know about or think about or care about. But you must find the words and come up with an explanation for things. Organize things and put them where they should be. And you will feel much happier.